Hey guys, Corey here with Team Backcountry. Today I want to talk to you guys about some go-to backcountry scopes. I've got hands-on experience with all three of these scopes. They're all great scopes on the market. They're not the most expensive, but they're also not the least expensive scopes out there. I've had hands-on experience with the Swarovski and the Razor for the last several years. The Leupold's new. I've helped a couple guys mount these up, sight them in. I've got one myself that's going on my muzzleloader this year I'm really excited about. These are definitely the class of scope that we like to hunt with. They're not dedicated long range scopes that are really heavy and have knobs everywhere. They've got great glass. They're all three lightweight scopes, but they have enough magnification to be able to stretch it out in big open country. The three scopes I have in front of me are going to be the Vortex Razor HD 3.5 to 15, the LH. The Leupold VX5-HD 3 to 15 as well, and then the Swarovski Z5 3.5 to 18 by 44. This is a scope I've had mounted on several rifles. I couldn't even begin to tell you. I play musical scopes quite a bit, and had this on my bear hunt last spring. I had it on my bear hunt this spring. Killed my deer with it on my muzzleloader this year. It's been a go-to scope. Dustin, Jason, and I have all owned Z5s or Z3s over the years. Really enjoyed them. But we'll get into, what makes each of these good, better, and best. So, Vortex Razor. This is the only one that isn't offered with an exposed turret. So, as we start stretching stuff out, and we need a way to compensate for bullet drop, the Vortex Razor, the only option is a reticle. I think the reticle is kind of the downfall. I enjoy hunting with a reticle, but I don't necessarily love the options that the Razor LH gives you. It's got 24 MOA, so you're stretching most cartridges out to, say, 800 yards plus, depending on what you're shooting. It's got good glass. It's got that lifetime warranty that Vortex shooters absolutely love. It's got a parallax adjustment. It's under 20 ounces. All three of these scopes are. It's a good scope. I think of the three, I definitely think that this has got the worst class. It's made in Japan, which could be worse. It could be China, but Japan's got good glass. It's a good scope for a guy just mounting it on it. Maybe wants to shoot out to 500-600 yards. And wants that warranty. $900 price point. It's a good deal in the scope market. 15 power for me on big game is plenty. If I'm shooting coyotes, I might want a little bit more. Definitely if I'm shooting varmints and prairie dogs and ground squirrels and stuff, I want a little bit more. But 15 power is plenty to be taking big game out at 800 yards. Any more than that, you're really magnifying dust particles, you're magnifying heat waves, and you're gonna actually struggle with more power at times. I like having, on a scope like this, I like having that bottom end at 3 power, because when we're hunting, that's what I'm going to hunt at. I'm going to hunt at minimum power. This also has, and all three of these scopes do, what's called a 5x zoom ratio, meaning it's going to start at 3 and go all the way up to 15. So I get that ability to crank her down to 3. I can find and make a quick shot really easily at 3 power, and then still have the ability to crank it to 15. Only offered in second focal plane. That's my personal preference when I'm hunting big game, is second focal plane, because I want to be able to find my reticle at both minimum and max power. Moving on, another $900 scope, the Leupold VX5-HD. You're going to find this in several reticle options. I know the Fire Dots run another $100. I know their BDC reticle runs another $100. The way they etch their reticles, it costs them a little bit more to build. It makes for a more durable scope, but it also adds costs when you start getting a fancier reticle. So I run a Windplex on this. I'm really happy with it. It's the $900 price point one, and then I'm going to run this exposed turret. I really like this scope. I've got high hopes for it. I've helped a couple people sight it in. It's tracked really well. It's a USA assembled scope by Leupold, so I have a little bit more faith in its durability than I do the Vortex. The warranty's great until you need to use it. So I do have a little bit more faith at the same price point that this is going to track. I've had several people look through both scopes. I think a general consensus is that this just has better glass. Still the 5x zoom ratio, same power at the 3-15, but when you set them side by side and try to pick detail out at 200 or 300 yards, because of the clarity, I think that, and honestly, you know, there's no FDA for optics, and so if this scope manufacturer says this is 15 power and this one does too, it's not saying the same thing. And so you really got to set them side by side, and I think 15 power from Leupold just gives you a little bit more zoom, and some of that could just be the clarity, because you can pick out it's got better resolution, it's got better clarity, definitely gathers light better, definitely give the edge glass wise to this scope. And then the turret, I think, is what really makes me like this scope a lot. This has got a 0 stop and it's got a 0 lock turret, meaning, and I think they call it the CDS ZL2, don't quote me on that, but once I have this set at 0, I'm probably going to sight this in at 200 yards, this is going to lock. And so I'm not worried about, like with most exposed turrets, me bumping it coming in and out of a scabbard. It's going to be locked in place till I hit this little button here and turn it. The clicks feel really good. You get almost two full revolutions once you've got this set. So I'm going to mount all 3 of these on a flat base because I'm going to zero it at 2, and most of my shots are going to be inside 5. So I don't want a 20 MOA base on there. And you get 2 full revolutions top to bottom. So once I have it set, what that means is I get 38 MOA out of this turret. And in this size, this is a 30 mil tube, the other 2 are 1 inch, and that's what gives you the room. But that turret design is special. It's something Swarovski hasn't been able to figure out yet. We'll get into that, but they're lightweight hunting scopes. You don't get near as much room. So 38 MOA will stretch any hunting cartridge out past 1,000 yards. It pushes my muzzleloader further than I'm willing to shoot it, which was the struggle with my Z5. It's got a parallax adjustment on the side. They all 3 do. Really, really big fan of this guy. I've got high hopes for it. I haven't hunted with this one yet because it is a newer scope, but it'll be on my muzzleloader this year. I'm going to put one on my wife's 6.5 Creedmoor as well. I think it's kind of the best of both worlds for a guy who wants to be able to shoot consistently out at 600 or 800 yards, as well as have a lightweight, bright hunting scope. And that's always been that balance that most companies have a hard time finding. And I believe because it's a USA built scope, it's got the gold ring on it, I believe it's going to track well too. The ones I've played with so far have tracked really well. The clicks feel good. Another benefit with that CDS turret is with the scope they give you a free coupon, and so you can turn in your ballistics, make sure you put it on a chronograph, and they'll cut you a turret. And so rather than needing to do the math or having a ballistic calculator there, it will tell you, you know, 0 to 200, put that new turret on there, and then you can just turn it to 600 yards. So you don't have to think, if you're a guy who doesn't want to have to think about MOA and running a ballistic app or anything like that, that's a huge benefit. Only good at one elevation and temperature. Anything higher or lower temperature wise or barometric pressure, you're going to have to know how to account for. So also incline, decline, that kind of thing. I tell most guys here in Utah to have them cut about 8,000 vertical feet and about 30 degrees. I think that's in the middle of where you're going to find deer and elk for your average guy. If you're a guy out in Colorado hunting the 14ers, you know, you might cut it at 12 or 13, but as long as you're within 1,000 or 1,500 vertical feet, you won't have to make much for adjustment at 500 or 600 yards. Huge fan of that guy. Swarovski, if you've known me, if you talked optics with me, you know that I absolutely love Swarovski optic products. The Z5 is no different. This has got, to me, the best glass of all 3 scopes. It's a 3.5 to 18 there again. Great power range. It's very lightweight. I think it's about a 16-ounce scope. It's got your parallax adjustment, 44 mil objective as well. This is offered with a exposed turret. I opted for the BRH reticle, which I think is their best hunting reticle. You get 16.5 MOA. It's a Christmas tree style reticle. They've got some good science behind there, so you've got some windage holds, which is cool. If you go for the turret, just know that while you get like 45 or 50 up and down in this 1-inch tube, you only get 13 once you've set your zero stop. So there is a zero stop, not a zero lock, but you only get 13.5 MOA. So what I ran into with my muzzleloader was that I wanted to shoot my muzzleloader out past 400 yards, and I needed a 200-yard zero to do that. So then when I'm hunting, I'm 4 inches high at 100. Not necessarily how I wanted to be hunting, and I wanted to stretch my gun a little bit further. And I think with that much bullet drop, it's just more consistent for me to do with a turret. So that's why I took that off my muzzleloader. I'm throwing the Leupold on there. I think this still might have better glass, but the fact that I get more room out of this turret's a big deal to me. 13.5 MOA gets, you know, a 7 mag or a 300 Win Mag out to 700, 800 yards with a 200-yard zero, depending on, you know, your atmospherics and what bullet you're shooting. So lightweight, bright, for a guy who's, you know, in that 500 or 600 yard wheelhouse, this Z5 is still a stellar scope. It's the most expensive of the three. These run right at $1,300, so it's not, you know, you are paying for that name. It's built over in, no, these are built in the U.S. It's actually, the Austrians outsource their labor to the U.S. because it's cheaper, believe it or not. So also a USA built scope. Their top end scopes are all built over in Austria, but their Z3 and Z5 lines are built over here. Stellar scope. I wish that they offered the reticle and the turret in the same scope, but you do have to choose one or the other. So you know, with any of these scopes, as always, use good mounts. I've got actually a set of Night Force mounts on my Leupold that I just had. It's probably overkill for that scope, if there's such a thing. I try to mount all these on flat bases. You don't gain anything with these by angling it down. I like the worn mounts for these. They're in the $100, $120 range. I think their Mountain Tech rings for the money are really hard to beat. I know guys like these lighter weight 1-inch scopes with tally one pieces. I've never gotten along well with tallies because I mount, you know, this scope's probably been on 10 of my rifles, and so it's harder to take them on and off and different things. So I do run a worn 2-piece Picatinny on most of my rifle scopes, and then a good set of rings is important. Make sure it's mounted properly, torqued properly. If you have any questions when you're setting anything up like this, Dustin's Finding Backcountry podcast, we sat down and did an optics. We talked, you know, ballistics, how and when to set it up. I think we brought up all 3 of these scopes and pros and cons and what we're looking for in a rifle scope. So that's a good resource. Feel free to reach out to us in the comments, Instagram, whatever you guys need. Feel free to reach out with questions. We'd love to help. Thanks for listening, guys.